and advancement of a nation. The key areas to be focused upon and the crucial elements to be highlighted are based on the policies that the government of a nation endorses. Although policy making is a governmental task, the roles of the citizens in formulating the policy is vital for a democratic nation. Therefore, to proliferate and exhibit a sense of participation in the policy making among the youth, the National Service Scheme Unit of the National Law University and Judicial Academy Assam, in association with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of the university, have come up with a policy making and drafting competition named as the National Policy Drafting Competition, VICHAAR, which is the first of its kind that is being organized by any institution of the northeastern part of our country. The aim of this competition is to make the youth aware of policy drafting and evoke a sense of creativity by refining their problem solving skills in regards to the various contemporary issues. I would now request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. V.K. Ahuja, to kindly commence the session with his enlightening words.
Thank you, Devanshi, and a very warm afternoon to all of you. Honorable Professor Mukul, my colleague Himanshu Ranjan, and my dear students. It's a matter of pride that we are going to have a program on the policy drafting under NSS unit. Sir, it so happened that my colleague Himanshu Ranjan, who has been given the responsibility to guide the students under the NSS unit, he approached me with this particular concept, a novel concept, something which was very dear to me. As you are aware that I'm also a part of the Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance. So he was asking me, sir, please suggest a name for a great personality who can inaugurate our function. So I said I have one in mind, and we'll just request Professor Mukul from Singapore, who is very well known in this particular area, and he will be the one who will be guiding us. And it's a matter of pride for me that, sir, you have not only been guiding us at the University of Delhi when we started our Delhi School of Public Policy, but then I thought that let you also be associated with National Law University Assam and keep on guiding our students and keep on blessing them. So with this particular idea in mind, I told Himanshu not to approach you with a polite request, and I told him that within no time you will get a response from sir because he is very particular in responding to the mails. Sir, you are, I think, ahead of 2 hours of Indian standard time. I think your time is ahead of 2 hours. So whenever I sent a mail to you in the late evening, so early morning, the first thing, the moment I check my mobile, I could see the answer, coming from your side. Sir, I would like you to please guide us with respect to public policy programs at Naluja. This is just a small thing, a small program which is being conducted by NSS unit and the students volunteers. But at the same time, I would also like you to, please guide us for initiating some certificate course or, small training programs or so on public policy. Because what I was just thinking was that we are the first one in the northeastern region, as Devanshi Srivastav had rightly pointed out. And if we start some program, on public policy, maybe that will be the first one in the entire northeastern region. So I'll keep on troubling you from time to time, sir, and keep on blessing our students. And I welcome you to this program. I welcome you to National Law University Assam, sir. And I think this is just a beginning, and you will have to bless our student. You will have to, grace our occasions from time to time. With these words, I will not waste much of the time of my audience, and we are eager to hear from you. So thank you, Devanshi.
Uh, Good evening to one and all present here. So I was tasked with giving an introduction speech for our chief guest today, Dr. Mukul Ashar. So I'd like to begin with that now. Good evening to one and all present here. We have been blessed with the presence of our chief guest for today's event, Professor Mukul Ashar. Professor Ashar is an internationally recognized scholar in the field of economics who is renowned for his contribution on public-private partnership, social security reform, and application of economic reasoning to public pension, among others. He started his journey in Mumbai, where he did his bachelor's of economics from Mumbai University. He then went on to pursue his master's and PhD from the prestigious Washington State University in the United States. In his illustrious career as a scholar, Professor Ashar has been involved with many governments in Asia as a consultant on the issue of tax policy and pension reform. He has also been involved with many international institutions such as World Bank, IMF, Asian Development Bank, WHO, among a host of other organizations. He was a faculty at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at National University Singapore for 4 decades before retiring in the month of June 2018. He has served as the chairman of the 5th State Finance Commission of Haryana in the year 2016. And in recent years, he has offered his services to the Niti Aayog as an expert on social protection set up by the Niti Aayog, and in the month of May 2020 to the government of Haryana as a chairman of Task Force on Resource Mobilization. He is also on the board of 2 companies, one listed on the NSE and another on the BSE. Professor Ashar, in his illustrious career, has published over 400 articles and edited more than 15 books, and has given presentation in many conferences, seminars, and workshops all throughout the world. He is a stalwart in all meanings of the word, and we are honored to be graced by his presence. It is my great privilege to request Dr. Mukul Ashar to present us with a speech and declare open the National Policy Drafting Competition, VICHAAR. Thank you. Sir, now I hand over the mic to you, and I would request you to make a short speech on our events today.
Okay, thank you. Pranam, everyone. Namaskar. It is indeed a privilege to be asked to open this very innovative program on public policy. We now know that public policies are very crucial for moving the country forward, but it is not just the policies, but the whole ecosystem surrounding the policies, including the implementation and the last mile delivery of amenities and services that are intended by the policies, that makes it a success or not. What I thought was that given that this is a law university and judicial academy, I will try to formulate some of my remarks around the legal reforms and put the public policies in a broader context. If we could begin with my slides, please. Can you put on my slides?
Mr. Rahul?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay,
It takes a second, it's starting.
Okay. All right. Pranam, namaskar again. Next slide. Okay. The title I have chosen is just one before my title, Making Public Policies Citizen-Centric. And this is really the key aspect that defines countries that are well governed, and countries that are not well governed. The broad content and so on of the policies are known, but how to make public policies citizen-centric in a particular context, particularly in the case of India, where there is so much heterogeneity, in a particular context is very critical. So public policy, citizen-centricness in Northeast will be very different way to approach and proceed than it will be, say, in the Western part of India. Next, please. As I was, next slide, as I was researching for this, sorry, could you go back, moving a bit too fast. I came across a great quote from Swami Vivekananda. And what he said over a century ago is still very relevant for us today. And I hope that as you move into this program of the contest on public policies, you will keep this quote in mind. Let me read the quote. I consider that the great national sin is the neglect of the masses. And that is one of the causes of our downfall. No amount of politics would be of any avail until the masses in India are once more well educated, well fed, and well cared for. If we want to regenerate India, we must work for them. So that is, sorry if I say one or two words in Hindi, niyat chahiye. In the those who are in the position of public trust, they have to have a niyat to see that the citizens benefit. And many of these needs are very basic. But as country grows, aspirations grow. Today, your younger generation has very different aspirations than people of my generation when we were growing up. And so how the public policies meet those aspirations is also relevant. Next, please. I thought this slide was very interesting because when we talk about the context specificity, we need to also be able to be mindful of the languages. And we have, while English is a language of business, it is essential for global opportunities, for wider opportunities to have English, doesn't mean that other aspect languages should be neglected in development and communication. I went to a Gujarati medium school in Mumbai until my secondary school education. Everything, math, science, was in Gujarati. Okay? Only when we went to college, then the English came in. But notice that while English is the largest spoken language in the world, well, next is Mandarin, Hindi is third. 615 million people is Hindi. Bengali is 265. And there will be a lot of others with 150 million people that will be speaking that language. Like Gujarati, which is my mother tongue, about 60 million people speak Gujarati. Next, please. Now, this graph shows India's population density in a 3D map. Notice where the bulk of the population lies. It's in the northern Gangetic Plain. This is the one we need to develop. We have some areas in Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore, in the south, and so on. But notice the bulk of the population is over here, and that's where our population density, population destiny lies as well, because that's the one we need to area that we need to develop. And in that, the important part of the Northeast, which earlier did not receive as much priority as was deserved, is now changing. And I'm very glad that the Northeast is receiving a lot of priority. Next, please. Okay. One of the things in public policies, as you do, you will come across again and again the usefulness of trust. Even in when I'm on the board of companies, and I interviewed many students for degrees and scholarships, some of the employees as well. One of the things I look for is whether they have the elements of trust in them. We can teach some of the skills. Basic skills, once you get a degree, are given. But a company or other institutions can teach skills. But what they can't teach are the two elements of trust. One is character. Character, intent, and integrity. In Hindi, intent is niyat. Niyat अच्छी है कि नहीं? हमारी नियत अच्छी नहीं होगी, you can't do very much good for the country. Okay, you may do good for yourself, but that is not the same thing as doing public good or public policy objectives of helping the citizens. So you have intent, you have to have integrity, and then the competence. So skills, knowledge, credibility, reputation, experience, and all that comes in. So these two are something that they need to be inculcated, they need to be developed. And only when that comes in, usually it is the family from the very young where character is built. Competence can come later with training and so on. But as I said, if your character, intent, and integrity are not there, knowledge and competence may not do as much contribution to public good as may be needed. Next, please. Now, when you do public policies, one of the questions that need to be asked is how to obtain value for money for public expenditure and public policies. We know housewives are very good at obtaining value for money. They bargain, they have a budget, they go out and they get the best for the family. And this is why very rigorous research shows that in public policies, whenever the government provides money to the families, the money should go to women, not to men. Because the research clearly shows that women better take care of the whole family's welfare as compared to men do. So the money should go to them, and we are moving in India in that direction. The National Audit Office of UK uses 3 criteria to assess the value for money of government spending. The optimal use of resources to achieve the intended outcomes. So what are those? And when you do your research, I saw the concept note and the topics and so on. Very interesting. When you do your research, think about this. Economy. Minimizing the cost of resources used or required. This is called spending less. Now, we know that particularly in government, there is not as much emphasis on the value of time takes too long, and that is given as an excuse, which it should not be. And there is very little cost consciousness because it is not their money, it is taxpayers' money, and not enough attention is paid to spending less. Then efficiency, the relationship between output from goods or services and the resources to produce them. So you spend less is the economy, spend well. So today in public policy, for example, you have every city like Bangalore gives huge amounts of money every year from the city budget to fix the potholes. Mumbai the same. I grew up in Mumbai, so I know. Every year Mumbai municipality gives a lot of money, but the potholes are there because nobody is looking at the efficiency aspects or how many kilometers of roads were built and of what quality. All of those measurement. What gets measured gets done. So when you do your public policies and research, see how the measurement part can be built into it. And then the effectiveness, the relationship between the intended and actual results of public spending, and that is spending wisely. So less, well, wisely are the key words for obtaining value for money. You can do less and well, but if you build a road which is not needed or which doesn't have much use or bridge, then you have not spent wisely. So it is important to understand what as Swamiji said, what the citizens need. Next, please. Okay. This just gives you in graph, which you can look at later, that you have resources, you have inputs, processes, and in that processes, the judicial part comes in as well. Outputs, outcomes. Outcomes are what we are looking for, not just the output. There are other influences. So we have economy, efficiency, effectiveness. And you might want to think about this as you do your research. Next, please. Besides the 3 E's, a 4th E is applied, which is equity. The extent to which services are available to and reach all people that are intended to. So you spend fairly. So less, well, wisely, fairly. Okay? Now, when you do your research, see they have this criteria being fulfilled. Next, please. Okay. Vivek de Broy, who is the chairman of the economic advisory council to the Prime Minister currently, and he has written some very good pieces which relate to law as well. But one of the things he says is, what is meant by reforms? We say, we did banking reform, we need electricity reforms, we need legal reform, we did this, we did that. But all that is fine, and it has its place, they are needed. But what he says is that first, definition of reform is context and time specific. So, for example, many of you are too young for this, but I remember as a young person about bank nationalization, which was done by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 69. It was considered a great reform. Today, it's a big, big negative for the economy. But so nobody will consider if today's government does bank nationalization or insurance nationalization, nobody will consider that a reform. They will consider a step backward. Indeed, the parliament just passed the National Insurance Reorganization Act just last week, and to try to uh, invite the private sector to participate in the insurance. So we are moving that 1969 bank nationalization and the insurance nationalization backwards. So time and context specific. And so this is not a sort of you look at a recipe and say, how do we make good chole bhature or whatever, and you just copy it. There's a lot of thinking involved. Second, examples of reform are like a positive list, which is the approach we have followed since 91. The preferred negative list route involves taking a position on what government should do and should not do. Many areas government should be doing, it is not doing well. Women's safety, for example, community safety. In many areas, government should not be involved, they are involved. For example, managing temples. And there's no reason for government to do that, but they have been involved. Or even running buses. Why should government have any particular competence in running buses? But the state transport has been there in many states. The latter is as important as the first. So in your research, consider this point as well. Next. He further argues the three organs of the state as laid down in the Constitution are the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Reforms are about examining these and their functioning. Indeed, reforms are also about questioning the present constitution. So the future legal professionals, scholars like you, have a particular responsibility now, according to De Broglie, that we judiciary aspects and the constitution aspect, which is need to be considered as part of the reform agenda. Reform are about generating a consensus on what we expect the government to do and what we don't expect it to do. It's about deciding which level of government, union, state, local, should perform a specific task. And we have not quite gotten around to that because we haven't done much administrative reforms. And the legal expertise is very much necessary in that area. In Soviet Union, former perestroika was about structures of the party and government. And glasnost was about citizens. So our reform should also be about responsibilities of citizens, not just their demands. And this is something that is part of the character, the elements of trust that we talked about. And particularly the legal profession has a lot of responsibility to try to advance the notion that citizens have rights, yes, but they also have responsibility. So you can't just talk about rights only. This is my right, that is my right. I can do what I like. But what are your responsibilities? What are you doing to take the country forward in a positive way? So this is why I started with that trust, character, and competence. This is a very broad canvas. And there are enough areas for you to find some of the niches. Okay. Next, please. De Broglie then notes a market-based economy operates on the basis of property rights. But the right to property is no longer a fundamental right in the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution now uses the word socialist. Let's leave aside legal subtleties and nuances of different judgments about whether the preamble is technically a part of the Constitution or not. Regardless of the technical answer, the preamble shapes judgments. This is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in November 15, 1946. 1948. He was proposing and opposing an amendment that sought to introduce the word socialist in the preamble. What should be the policy of the state, how the society should be organized in its social and economic side are matters which must be decided by the people themselves according to time and circumstance. So this is a very context specific, and Dr. Ambedkar had a great sense of what is a good public policy, that you have to be time and circumstances. It cannot be laid down in the Constitution itself because that is destroying the democracy altogether. So we need to work constructively as citizens. Legal fraternity can contribute to this part about changing, removing the word socialism from the Constitution. There is the Representative of People's Act 1951 about registering a political party. Among other things, the party will have to adhere to the principle of socialism. What? So we have to go back to Ambedkar. All right, next please. Next slide. To continue Du Bois' argument, rule of law has two critical elements: the law itself and the institutions that help enforce it, mainly police and judiciary. In any reform agenda, this ought to be the right up front. So when you are doing public policy analysis, I hope you will have some reference to police and the judiciary. Despite the fact that the Constitution mentions three organs of state, executive, judiciary, and legislative, why is the exclusive focus of the reform discourse on the executive, and particularly on the union government, not even state and local governments? Why we are giving a free ride from accountability and responsibility to the state governments, and that needs to be addressed. Why don't we talk about judicial reforms? Why do we never talk about reforming the legislature, parliament, and state legislature? By the way, in 2020, the average state legislator made 18 days. How can you do any work in 18 days a year? Reforming. So reform is a much bigger canvas than just a banking sector or other sector. What about states and administrative channels for delivering governance? We have had only one state reorganization commission in 1953, and it submitted its report in 1955. A priori, one doesn't know what the appropriate threshold levels are for either population size or geographical area. But it does seem that some states are too large to be governed efficiently. Some states are too small to be governed efficiently, with governance now being interpreted in that economic sense. In other words, Du Bois' reform agenda will include a second state reorganization commission. So what he says is that we need to, in our reform discussion, so when you say public policy reform, that should include reforming the institutions in the way that it is defined. Next, please. Okay. Now, a few minutes on legal reforms. There is widespread consensus that judicial reforms, including the selection process for judges at all levels and their work processes and norms, are needed. And here's a very insightful piece I suggest you read on why legal reforms remains an afterthought. Next. Okay. He argues that if three organs of state cannot ensure rule of law, the state has abdicated its responsibility. And there is a widespread justifiable consensus that India has a lot of room to improve in this dimension. So that part of public policy cannot be ignored. Let me quote him. It should be one's right to know what existing statutes are. For the union government, courtesy India Code, that is available. We know all that. For almost all state governments, that information is not available. Major statutes are available, certainly in printed form, but I meant all statutes, not only major ones. Laws are often not statutes, but subordinate legislation in the form of rules, regulations, notifications, circulars, orders, and so on. If statutes aren't available, it follows that subordinate legislation isn't available either, except for India Code. Law is what a government official proclaims it to be. Since reform are about transparency and reduction in discretion, this is understandable, this is undesirable. To impart some optimism, an exercise to incorporate state laws into the Indian Code has started, but it is early days. And I hope some of you will intern on this project and help this project along. Next, please. India doesn't have a system of dispute. In plain language, there aren't close-ended with natural death after a prescribed time period. They are open-ended, have to be specifically identified for repeal. Through successive acts, the union government has repealed around 1,600 old statutes. Aren't old statutes harmless? No, not really. They can be used for harassment. While identifying old and dysfunctional sections, one can rationalize and harmonize. Statutes in the same area have been enacted at different points in time with varying definition. This leads to alternative judicial interpretation, causing further confusion in case law. Factor markets are a prime example of this. For instance, at the union government level, there were roughly 54 statutes directly or indirectly dealing with labor. Those under administrative control of the labor ministry have now been unified into 4 codes. When statutes are unified, subordinate legislation will also be unified. Next, please. Enacted statutes often reflect a mindset of state control. Therefore, a proper revamp of legislation requires us to take a position on what the government should do and should not do. A legal system is only as good as its enforcement, that is, speed of dispute resolution. If it takes decades, the system isn't credible to punish the wicked or protect the virtuous. The number of cases pending for more than 10 years is 1,200 for the Supreme Court, around 780,000 for high courts, and just over 2 million for lower court. This should be unacceptable. And the judicial fraternity has a lot of responsibility. Thanks. Next. What does he suggest? There are at least 4 strands. First, there is a question of judicial strength. Though the number and skill sets of non-judicial staff are equally important in using technology. This is the supply side solution. Second, there is a set of reforms linked to improving judicial efficiency and court productivity through education, training, better court administration in non-judicial functions, and improved case and case flow management facilitated by infrastructure improvements. It's also a supply side situation. Third, as a sub-strand to number 2, information and communication technology can be used to enhance productivity. Fourth, demand for adjudication can be reduced through alternative channels of dispute resolution, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, and reducing government's contribution in civil litigation. Can law student association, law university, such as yours, consider playing a constructive role in the fourth area on the demand side. So supply, demand, productivity, these are the bare facts when you come down to reforms. Next. Okay, let me conclude. Growing interest in public policies is a welcome positive sign. This interest needs to be sustained, and I very warmly congratulate you on the initiative that you have taken. Wish you every success there. The challenge is to obtain citizen-centric outcomes from public policies in the context of India's complex political economy. And again, spending less, well, wisely, and fairly. So all the fairness should also come in. Next, please. This presentation has also argued that reform of institutions, including the Constitution and the governance at all levels, including state and urban and local bodies, is essential for India to manage challenges of the 21st century. An urgent need for judicial reforms. I hope all of you get involved and make your contributions. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Pranam.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. Very good evening to Professor Mukul, sir, our Honorable VC, sir, and all the fellow audiences. I am Pranav Gandhi here, the convener of NSS unit of National Law University and Judicial Academy. And it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of all those who are involved in this initiative that we have named VICHAAR. My heartiest gratitude at the very first to the Almighty who has been keeping us safe and sound in the difficult times that we have recently been through. On behalf and on the next note, on behalf of NSS unit of National Law University and Judicial Academy, I would like to give a heartfelt vote of thanks to our Honorable Chief Guest for today, Professor Mukul Asher, who has spent his valuable time gracing our initiative today. Today, we had the opportunity to hear your ideas and thoughts, and it was definitely a very productive and informative speech by you, sir. You seriously underlined some of the most basic and important factors that need to be kept in mind while drafting any type of policy, whether be it economic or social. What a very important thing that you mentioned today is the role of our university and institutions like ours in bringing overall reform in the judicial ecosystem of our country. And we believe we will be able to stand by your expectations in future, and we are working towards this. I also wish to all the participants of VICHAAR who have joined us today here a very best of luck. Guys, you have taken up a very important or a very crucial skill set through registering in this competition, and that is of thinking about solutions of the problem that our society faces. We have already received around 86 registrations in last 1.5 weeks for which the registrations have been open. And the closure date for the registration is still 3 weeks away. So we expect a lot many more registration and a lot many more people joining us in this initiative. I also thank the judges and administrators who are working really hard behind the scenes to execute this competition beautifully. And never the least, thanks to all our attendees here for being very patient and active audiences who have come to join us from different parts of the country, not only India, but even outside. So thank you and have a great evening ahead. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining us. Thank you.
Madam, you owe a special thank to your registrar also, who is also present.
Oh, I'm really sorry for missing Honorable our registrar, ma'am. Also, we have with us also our registrar, Ms. Indra Noshi Das from Assam Public Services Commission. Thanks a lot for joining us, ma'am. You are the one who actually gave a go-ahead to this program like 4 months ago when we were in middle of this COVID second wave. Your contributions towards the program are immense, ma'am, and we really thank you for your support to our initiative here. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So I
now
think
allowed to leave.
yes, sir. Now we are allowed to leave. I think we can end this session here now. Thanks a lot for joining, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Sir.
Thank you.